this environment. Anyway,
You remember there was, I was reminded, remember there was some guys that followed a manager from Massey stores and took the individual back and robbed the store a while back.
Yes, that happened.
So, yeah.
let's say good
All right.
morning to Professor Ramesh Deosaran. Good morning, Professor Deosaran.
Morning,
to
Prof.
all. Morning to you. Hello. Morning to you and your
You are
staff.
looking in the pink of health.
Your
What you doing?
viewers. Pink of
Morning,
health. That's a
Professor
good word.
Deosaran.
That's
Yeah,
good.
you're looking very, very well.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you.
Retirement
Yeah,
works for some people, you know.
He's never retired. He's always writing a book. He's not retired.
Yeah.
He may retire from
always
84, but
occupied.
he's always occupied. Anyway,
You can't retire
good
in
morning,
this country.
Professor
You can't
Deosaran.
retire.
A lot to discuss this morning. Of course, our poll this morning focused on the robbery at Massey. We had the issue of the 3D guns being printed in Trinidad and Tobago, which another of your colleagues, Dr. C. Prasad, indicated is a worrying development, as did the Prime Minister. What are your thoughts on that particular development?
Well, that, in terms of police reports, that's an unprecedented incident, but it has very serious implications because we have always boasted that we are not a gun manufacturing society. The guns are coming from north, from south, but this is a very alarming situation because it means that whatever is done in central Trinidad, the manufacturing of guns using 3D and plastics and so on, could be easily replicated in very clandestine ways in other parts of the country. Now, how could the police detect and prosecute such offenses? How would they know? Which brings us to the role of citizens, Paul. We have a lot of deficiencies in terms of citizen support through information to the police. These incidents, they have to reach the police. And how do they reach the police? What intelligence does the police have to detect such things? Could they tap telephones of suspected persons? Could neighbors make a report that there are some very peculiar incidents happening around them and they want to report it privately to the police and hope that such information will be kept confidentially? So those are the support systems we need, but I want to wish all the students and teachers, Paul, you're an educator, and I want to perhaps join with your own sentiments in wishing the students and the teachers the best for the education and the teaching and the learning. Because when I heard, I am not digressing it because there is a connection as to why people do these criminal activities. The school has a lot to do with it. For example, when I hear that there are thousands of dropouts, that is an amazing thing for a small country with such a, at the top of it, sophisticated educational system. This is frightening because the dropouts, they drop out of school, but they drop in crime. And they associate with gangs.
Why do you think our education system is not more effectively dealing with that? Because I brought it up in Parliament. You've brought it up in Parliament. You've written about it. Your late colleague, Professor Ryan, had a huge document, Youth at Risk, on it. Several other criminologists have brought it up. This nexus between the education system failing a significant enough portion of persons who feel disenfranchised, who don't feel catered to, who more easily, unfortunately, turn to crime. And we don't seem to be placing the kind of attention on those students as we should. There's a dropout from the 18,000 that write SCA to going to secondary school of about 1,500 to 2,000. Between Form 1 and Form 5, there's a further about 1,000. Add that year on year, and you have a significant number of students. Now, some actually go back into the system, but you don't even know how successful they are when they go back into the system. And there's some who graduate or who go through the system, I mean, let's say graduate, and are not engaged sufficiently to be trained for anything productive. So you have all those circumstances lining up, and we don't seem to be making the connection or recognizing the connection enough to intervene urgently.
Well, there are two related issues here, Paul. What you have mentioned is the criminogenic gaps in the education system, meaning the dropouts, those who repeatedly fail, who resent going to school. That climate is not friendly to a civil society. And I don't think the education ministry and the government as a whole are paying enough attention to that deficit. One of the reasons being it's a pattern. Politicians and government don't like to embarrass themselves by bad news. But we have to have the integrity, the political integrity now, Paul, to recognize what is not working, how it needs to be corrected, and be honest with the people. The connected issue which worries me a lot is that when Minister Garcia was there, he and the CEO decided to shut down reports, administrative reports, and all the other reports that provided information to the public, like how many students passed, which school they came from, which districts were more successful at other districts. Those demographics were removed, and they said, well, you have to apply through the Freedom of Information Act to get access to these kinds of information, which are very important for policy making and for civic attention. In other words, we were blindfolded by that decision. And I wish this new minister, I mean, not new anymore, but she should revise that and make all these reports available to the public more easily, because it will tell us exactly what is happening and where the different boards, school boards, and so on could intervene, where the community could intervene. Because overall, apart from the data, in terms of educational process, I think the time has come, given the environment, for example, apart from the data, the process in the schools, in the curriculum, there should now be a course, not one course, a program in secondary schools, particularly, gradually moving up from Form 3 to Form 5. Social justice, let them know what the laws are, what the consequences for committing certain crimes are. Educate them in terms of character building, not only in terms of goodness and evil, but the real practical way of a student, a young person living in a democratic society, must be aware of the consequences for committing crime. What's happening now? A lot of these young people come out without knowing apparently what the consequences for crimes are, especially certain crimes. So we need to educate their minds as to the consequences, the value of respecting people's property, the value of helping the police, and all those elements in a social justice program. So apart from the data and so on, we need to build the education system more appropriately suited to the environment in which we live. And the environment in which we live is a very criminogenic one. Everybody knows that. Apart from the murder rate and home invasions, there's a rise in violence. So to curb that, the police have their work to do, the courts have their work to do, but the schools have a bigger mission now than before in order to make it appropriate to the environment. You cannot have an education system very far removed from the environment. And that is what happening. The training, Paul, is not appropriate. We have undervalued technical and vocational training. We have undervalued that culturally. We have to restore a cultural appreciation for technical programs, not and Lord don't live and die by the grammar type schooling. So I think we need to look at it in this broader context, and we're not doing that partly because the public
Professor Deosaran,
allows enough in terms of the data.
yeah, is not. I'm hearing you on that issue with the social program, and I believe it can work. But is not what RI at some other level was also doing in terms of preparing students and teaching students certain consequences and so on that we have also gotten rid of?
Well, I still believe secondary school is a better place for it because they are learning other things too. They are learning history, they are learning geography, social studies, and this could be put in a more practical way. And I would strongly recommend that the ministry. Later on, they do it in university, but that's for certificates. I'm talking about character building, socialization. When you socialize children earlier, the earlier you socialize them into things about your conscience, about doing right from wrong, in the home and in the school particularly, it is you have a better chance of having them serve well as they become adults. There's a magic in character building,
So,
because
you're suggesting it's not happening as naturally in the family and the home, so it should be formalized in the education system.
yeah, I think so. I think we have to do it because it's an appropriate response to the society. It is not something you're bringing out in a vacuum or you're dropping from the sky. The society is grieving, is hurting. As the former president used to say, people are hurting. And the education system is still in the traditional way as if nothing outside is happening. You have to look at what's happening in the system in terms of intercultural relationships. We need better relationship. We can't spell one another names properly. Those are old time things. We have to modernize the system, primarily suited to the society in which we live. And we're not doing that. We're still glamorizing scholarships. We're still glamorizing who comes first and second. And you have 1,000 of them coming much lower down
Mm-hmm.
in the society. And perhaps without maliciousness, that is how they were trained, stealing, breaking into people's homes to make a living. And that's how they gain respect in their own subcultures. We have to break that. And what can break it is the education system. We can talk about parenting another time. But even parents have problems now. The parents we have now are those who have dropped out. So you have
But how do you change the system? Because the change has to be initiated, I want to suggest, from the Ministry of Education, whether it is one, they certainly direct policy across the education system, whether denominational and or government institution and government run schools. And how do you get the system to be responsive in the way that you're suggesting? Not only inculcating values and the importance of that social contract between students as they mature into adulthood, and I agree with you, I think it should be something in primary school, the basic ethics of living in a society with other human beings and what is expected of you. And the courtesy, the values of courtesy, the values of understanding that you are in a space where you have to allow and be tolerant with other people's and their differences, etc., and how you deal with conflict. All of those are important tools that need to be taught. But you live in a country where the behemoth of education seems very slow to change and metamorphosize into what you're talking about. How do you gain traction in that beyond sitting down on a show like this and talking about it?
Well, you're right. I mean, sitting down on a show like this and talking is very interesting and friendly, but where does it reach? That is why I'm saying I am going back to my issue about the data. If the reports, as I have seen them in previous ministers, when Hazel Manning was there, this information was free, properly configured in booklets, annual reports. It was rich with data, and people knew what was going on in the school. And she was leading a mission of reconstruction, but things happen, and as you know what happened with the politics. But if the teachers' union, the national boards, the PTAs across the country recognize the need about which I'm talking about, and they will if they are properly informed.
As an academic, have you requested this data, the year-on-year results, in more granular detail, of course, so that somebody like yourself, who's a respected academic, can do the detail? Have you requested, and What happened if you requested it?
If I what, Paul? Sorry.
If you requested this kind of data, it used to be published before.
Yes, 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 yes. I don't have the time to go to Freedom of Information Act for every little thing I need. I need to know which schools are performing better and why, and what can the community do or the teachers do to remedy it, for example. But we don't know that readily. You have to know how the passes in Cape and so on are going from school to school. You're not stigmatizing anybody. You have to democratize the education system, meaning that people must know what's going on in the system. And the way to know that is not through rumors and you have a fight down Faizabad and the press headline tells you about that. You need more authentic information. What's that I'm talking about? So I'm not necessarily complaining, because I know the ministry has its own issue because they will say, well, if they release these reports, people will publish them and they will stigmatize schools. But you have to give more allegiance to the democratic way of life. Democracy thrives on education. Democracy thrives on information is the oxygen of democracy in all respects. And that is why we have joint select committees. And if the joint select committee call in the minister and executive, these are the issues I believe.
But even those, you have to pull teeth to get information. They give you this of information. Professor Deosaran, recently the commissioner, in her independence message, outlined some successes in her strategies in terms of, and I'm paraphrasing here, so please forgive me, a leveling off of the murder rate in August due to successful strategies. What's your comment on that?
Paul, to deal with the statistics is a dead-end issue. The business people have already called for accountability. They have criticized the commissioner. They have criticized the government. There's not much more I can say about that. What I am into now is, well, how are you going to restructure the police service? Just like I'm saying about the education system, to deal more efficiently and effectively with the challenges they have.
But you did a manpower audit years ago, commissioned by the government. There was a commissioner. Well, it was done when Stephen Williams was commissioner. We had, after Stephen Williams, McDonald Jacob. After him, we had Gary Griffith, and now we have Mrs.
Wrong order, Paul.
Well, wherever
Gary
the order.
Griffith before McDonald Jacob.
Gary Griffith, McDonald Jacob, and now Mrs. Here with Christopher. And you're still talking about restructuring the police service for efficiency. Have you seen the recommendations of that manpower audit commissioned by the government, who put Mrs. With Christopher in the seat, who put Mr. Griffith in his seat, being carried out the recommendations and significant change or transformation in the service for better efficiency and better results and performance?
The government, the cabinet decided to appoint this police manpower audit because it felt there were some things needed to be done with the police in terms of the ratio of police officers to each district, what is the human resource capabilities are inside the service, and matters of that kind. And what are the recommendations made to reduce and control crime in its different forms? And how does the public feel about the police and what can be done? Such were the objectives and so on. But as you know, Paul, it is a bit awkward in the public mind for the author of a report. I was chairman of the committee to mention of why government not implementing the recommendations. It might be as if I'm crossing my line because cabinet has the final duty.
No, I'm not asking if you to comment on whether if you're seeing the kinds of change in performance in the police service that would indicate that some of the recommendations have been applied. Are you seeing those?
Yes, Paul. Yeah. I'm coming with that. But before I interpret your answer, let me create the premise. That is, I don't want to talk too much because, especially if it looks as if I'm pushing my own fame. The irony in it is that Ola, the present commissioner, was a member of that 8-member committee. And she signed off on it. Everybody signed off on the recommendations. One of the key recommendations was to review the Police Service Commission, and we gave them three options. Nothing of that has been happening. Another key recommendation, Paul, is to upgrade the entry qualification for the police. Because one, I know we don't have much time, but briefly, for one reason is that you have all this training by the FBI, people coming abroad to train the police officers, constables, corporals, and so on. But if they don't have the intellectual capacity and the basic knowledge that is required to benefit from these higher level training, you spin it up in mud. It's like water on duck's back. So we need to raise the level, start off with a certificate, then a diploma, and possibly a degree. We have courses at the university. I developed criminology programs at the university up to the PhD level. I developed, when I was president of UTT and a program professor at UTT, I developed programs in criminology and public safety at the various levels. So the programs are there, but they should be used for entry in order to develop the capacity, both operationally and intellectually, of the police service. And that, like the education system, is a need that needs to be fulfilled. And we included that in our recommendations for the Manpower Audit Committee. So the government has work to do, and the people must encourage the government to do what is right. The social and welfare organization of the police service must step in and create a 5-year, for example. Say, well, in 5 years, we are going to go this route of upgrading the entry qualifications, but do something that will show the police service is preparing itself to respond to the challenges that they are now facing in the country.
Professor Deosaran, you were able a short while ago to identify the current commissioner as part of an 8-member committee. Do you care to identify who were the other members of that committee? Did it, because Gary Griffith could not have been because he wasn't part of the police service, but was McDonald Jacob part of that committee, and anyone else in the hierarchy of the police service as it is now?
As far as I remember, and since you called his name, Gary Griffith appeared before the committee. We invited him and we sat with him at length, and he gave his views to the committee, some of which we included in the report. The other members were the commissioner of police, the deputy commissioner, Mr. Philip, as I remember now, I'm remembering. We had the chairman of the Police Social and Welfare Association. We had a permanent secretary, Jackie Wilson. We had as far as I remember.
And they all signed off on it.
Oh, we also had an attorney from the Attorney General's office, and so on. But you could see it was well rounded. And I
would you agree with the statement that the police service is either slow or reluctant to change?
Well, all the organizations don't change so easily, Everybody has a comfort zone. It's staying in the office or not doing certain things. And if it is not pulled up by the supervisors, nothing will happen. Change requires mashing cones. That is what Jesus did. You have to mash a few cones to have progressive change. For example, about 25 years ago, Paul, I don't know if I was in Parliament or even before that. There was a policy decision to hire civilians in the police service so that the police now would go more on the streets. You have about 500 civilians now in the police service. And the police are still inside offices rather than being more actively on the streets. It's a manpower issue. And this is one of the issues we raised. You have to
let distribution of manpower.
Let the civilians do their recording, whatever administration thing they have to do, and so on. But that has not happened. What you have now is civilians tumbling over one another in the police service, whereas there should be an opportunity now for more policemen to go out, the 7,000 or whatever it is.
But Professor Deosaran, if I remember correctly, when Dwayne Gibbs and Uwatsky became deputy commissioner, they tried to institute that measure and they met with great resistance from the police service, from the members of the rank and file of the police service. They were of the view that there was no need for police officers to be in charge rooms and they needed to be out on the beat. And they met great resistance to that. Am I correct?
Mr. Gibbs, in my view, as chairman of the Police Service Commission then, was a good officer. His demeanor, his attitude, and his operational experience were manifested in the way the direction he was taking. I won't talk about the other one, the deputy, Iwaski. He's a different kettle of fish. But Gibbs was an honorable man. So he tried.
I don't want to comment on that.
He tried. But as the Calypsonian said, politics got in the way. And you know the story.
Yes,
He was paid off and sent back to Canada. Now, whose responsibility is that? We didn't do it as the commission. The cabinet did it. I think it was Ganga Singh and was acting and he made up a contract. So, when you call these names, a lot of people, Paul, you are independent senator. I know you sometimes have to be restrained and so on. But a lot of these people who play angels today have committed sins before. And when you hear them speaking now, I don't want to call the names, but there's a realm of hypocrisy in this society that has affected public policy.
Oh, Lord, I use that word all the time.
But Professor Deosaran, the kinds of, we just spoke a while ago about the 3D gun manufacturing, which is to me a dangerous development. You identified that if there was one, there can be others. We a couple of weeks ago also identified and arrested, I think, a Chinese national for production of methamphetamines. You are seeing an evolution of criminality in the country. How concerned are you about this? I mean, we have the murder issue, we have the other crimes, the murder is the general barometer. How concerned are you about these new developments in the criminal environment?
Very concerned, Paul. Very concerned. And to get at the root of it, you see, crime is a sociological phenomenon, largely. There are crimes of passion, but largely, crime is a sociological phenomenon. I have always dealt with crime as a sociological, social, psychological phenomenon. Criminology is a bastard child, really, of sociology. You cannot deal with criminology properly without knowing sociology and social psychology. So I am more of a social scientist with criminology as a sub-discipline as far as my university education is concerned, all the courses I took. Now, you are asking about these new challenges, and you have to get at the root of it. Where are the organizers? Because some of these crimes look as a private enterprise, They are organized. They are repeated. You have to look at the immigration situation. How many people are coming and going? It's easy to come to Trinidad and commit a crime and depart back to your island, Easy. Now you have the flow of Venezuelan immigrants and you're beginning to see the tip of the iceberg. That will come. Gangsterism from Venezuela will soon flow into Trinidad and maybe prosper too, which will
soon? You're suggesting it's not here yet?
Pardon me?
You're saying soon as if it's not here yet.
Well, I'm being gentle on the point, Cole. I'm Paul. I'm trying to be gentle on the point. But once you say it, people will, their attention will be sparked. And like
but a criminal mind must look at the landscape in Trinidad and Tobago and see that there's a lot of discussion about crime, because crime is the preeminent issue facing this country. Crime economy. And of course, the other sub-disciplines roll from that. What is causing it, the education system, the social sector, etc. And you have a criminal mind or a criminal organization must come to some sort of mindset that this is fertile ground. to, in addition to all the discussion on crime and all the effort and all the money being placed, to decide you're going to set up a 3D gun printing company, to decide that you're going to set up a illegal chemical manufacturing operation. It speaks to some assessment being done to me and people realizing this place is real vulnerable. So let me try it here.
Well, the crimes you mentioned, Paul, they all are profit making. And nothing energizes a criminal mind than making a profit, whether it's illegal drugs, home invasion, being in a gang. So money has now become, you must say, evil. The search for money, quick money, that is, not just money, quick money, illegally, is now a large part of the Trinidad and Tobago culture. Look what's happening in Tobago. Crime is increasing. There are murders now you never had before. And I don't think it will stop there if nothing serious is being done, because it's a very small island. It's smaller than Trinidad. It could be managed. So that's why I say it's a sociological phenomenon we're dealing with, because it has to do with the society, different aspects of the society, the regional aspect to it. The different divisions will tell you, look, Northeast, they say, has the highest murder rate now. Why? Because it's more industrialized. What is the reason for it? What are the demographics that contribute to this? What are the vulnerabilities that make Northeast so vulnerable to criminal activities as compared to another country, another region? So it's sociological, and we have to be informed sociologically to be a good criminologist. Those who know criminology only do not really know criminology. They have to know social psychology, education, statistics, and that is what I think you would make a good criminologist, Paul, because of your background.
Professor Deosaran, I want to build a bit on Paul's point just now in terms of criminals looking at here as a fertile ground to be able to set up these new types of businesses at this point in time. Now, there was a point way back in the day, and I think we could all attest to this. You used to hear who involved, that this minister might be involved or this high official might be involved. You're not hearing that now, but yet still, these things are happening in Trinidad and Tobago. Why?
Several United Nations report clearly see that the drug trafficking, the illegal human trafficking, could never have occurred if high officials in the public service were not involved as facilitators. That is undisputed by the evidence the United Nations have gathered. I was on a committee, United Nations Drug and Crime Committee, and we went to South Africa on different parts and we found that is true. Trinidad is no exception. That is why Dr. Rowley, as Prime Minister, tried to use the vetting issue and create an elite group of people to deal with that. But that produced industrial relations problem, and the social welfare organization, Mr. Dixon, they objected in terms of the differential in payment and so on. But it was a recognition. It was a recognition there was something wrong inside the police service that obstructed a more efficient way of dealing with higher level crimes. So it's there, it's still there. But Ola Christopher is not mentioning it because it might be an internal PR issue with the rest of the officers.
But is it then that they're doing it so much better now that their names not even calling?
Well, you're speculating. It is quite possible. Some of them might have become conscience stricken that they're doing a wrong thing. But they are being paid from outside in terms of importation of goods. Look, there are several incidents of cocaine found in bottles, marijuana found in containers, big headlines, and over time, it just evaporated.
But what you're suggesting is that the domestic agencies have been so contaminated. And we spoke about police, but we have to include customs and excise too. Let's not pretend that police are the only agency that's been contaminated by corruption. It suggests that the contamination is so pervasive or so in such critical areas that it's almost impossible for us, for many different reasons, including political, including legislative, to interdict properly. Is it that we need an external or externally sourced group of people to come in here and clean up these institutions?
We tried that, We had this Ross report, the Scott report, the Matrowski report. Look at the recent one is the manpower.
But they
manpower.
did the research. Were they involved in actually setting up sting operations and operationalizing
isn't that what the new unit that the Prime Minister is suggesting supposed to do?
Yeah, Professor Deosaran just referred to that.
You use a magic word there, Paul. Sting operations. You need sting operations. Carefully shaped and implemented in all districts across the country. If I were commissioner, just hypothetically speaking, I would hire about 100 such sting operators. Now, a sting operator is one who would insert himself or herself in the community, move around, make friends, find out, set up a system in a hotel, maybe. We're going to give you this money if you do so and so. Let the police officer, whoever he or she may be, come, put your video in place, and the result will be a sting operation successfully. Now, I would also recommend, to modernize the police service, the licensing of private investigators to help in police surveillance, private investigations, well-trained, well-equipped, and license them.
Bounty hunters then.
They might be lawyers or whatever. Let them have the officers so the public can go to them for help in investigation in collaboration with the police.
Because certainly the criminals are doing it. The criminals are engaging recruits. They are engaging people to do their business.
Sometimes you wonder, if the criminals are more organized than the police service. Because they seem to be so efficient. Look at these home invasions. They seem to be so efficient, and I'm wondering whether there's a pattern or not. And the communities are so vulnerable. You can't blame the communities. I mean, people have to walk in the pavements. They have to go shopping. They have to sit in their bedroom and watch TV. But in spite of all these activities, which are constitutionally allowed, freedom of movement, private property, all these constitutional freedoms are being eroded. And that's a serious, dangerous thing. Apart from that, when I read a couple of Sundays before the local government elections, people in the Sawa Lavantil Regional Corporation area, they said they were afraid to speak out about their conditions, the drainage, the broken roads, all these things. They're experiencing these mishaps, but they're afraid to talk. And people are now getting into a realm of fear to talk. In a society, one measure of a healthy democracy is the extent to which people feel free to talk. But they are self-censorship because the way the criminals and the way confidential information has been leaked, people are afraid to talk. We have to remedy that by building confidence in the institutions, primarily the police. But a measure of a healthy democracy is the extent to which people feel free to talk.
Well, Professor Deosaran, I've been saying that for a while, and especially with reference to the police service, that good police officers are afraid and are not speaking out against the bad ones. It's not, and until that changes, we're really not going to be able to fix this place. That's my humble opinion. I might be wrong. I hope I'm wrong. But until the police service is able to fix itself, we are in a conundrum.
Yeah,
I've said it for 15 years.
Very good point. Until the police service is able to fix itself by the leadership it has and the government facilitating that, we will have a serious problem.
Yes.
When you say
I,
bringing people from abroad, they'll be resented, as that happened before. They wouldn't get cooperation. Nobody will provide information. Look what's happening to the Paria inquiry, which is another dismal example of governance in this country. Because these people are being paid and they can't do the work. Two deadlines have passed. So you've got to start internally with the police service. And I think you are quite right, quite right, quite right.
I've
Charity begins
resigned
at
myself
home.
to that thinking, sadly.
Are you monitoring the issue with the drugs of the East Coast and the implications of that?
Well, that's another dramatic example. It's very dramatic because of the volume of cocaine and how it was dropped and the consequences in the village arising from that incident. I think the first thing comes to mind is the border control. And what about our border patrols? What about the boats that are available to patrol? It brings us into a bigger issue. And I think so much has been said about that. Things that are very obvious. Border control.
Is it not, are you satisfied with the investigations into so-called legitimate businesses whose names we shall not call for obvious reasons, who many suggest are fronting legitimate business, but really are into drug and gun running? I spoke to a past finance minister years ago, and he suggested, I know he said it publicly, so I won't call his name because he's retired now, that as much as 40% of our economy could be narco-related.
Well, we long had a narco economy. Long ago. It was started in the streets, small business type, but now it's big. Narco economy is a big problem, very big, because it's so profit oriented, and it could be done in such a clandestine manner, and with security officers' complicity, it will thrive. But the gentleman just now who spoke, he said you got to start internally. It is linked to the internal integrity of the police service. These frontal people and so on. Some of them are well known. I remember Mr. Manning, when I was in Parliament, he got up and he said he's going after Mr. Big. Mr. Big, well, he was chairman of the National Security Council. He must have had some idea as to who this Mr. Big was at the time. What came out of that? Nothing.
A play
No.
called Looking for Mr. Big.
So I don't know. It's the question about drugs too. We have to get an understanding now. This thing about legalizing drug or managing drug use and thing like marijuana. All the money spent by the American, by all these different countries, billions spent in cutting down the cocaine trees and so on and so on and so on. Those things not working. Not working. We have to take a very serious look internationally at the drug situation and whether it's a matter of self-responsibility or whether public policy is necessarily required.
As we close, how much has the Venezuelan situation impacted our criminal scenario in Trinidad and Tobago, if at all?
Paul, it is. I mean, I haven't heard any big businessman coming to invest, Venezuelan invest in Trinidad and so on, to help our economy. The people who are coming are people who feel hard pressed in Venezuela. And when they come to Trinidad, I don't know if they will gain any prosperity, given that Trinidadians themselves are becoming hard pressed. I know the economy is growing, but I'm not seeing that reflected too much in people being hired. I mean, this Minister Cummings is developing all kind of programs to help young boys being trained. That's a different issue, but it tells you the challenges that exist. And I don't know if the Venezuelans who are coming are of that capacity, both in terms of money and education, to help build this country. And we've seen signs of that already. Look, Venezuela killed another Venezuela a few days ago. And that might be the tip of the iceberg in terms of immigration. And we have to look at that because, there's an ethos now coming in that every country must look after itself. First of all, I'm not saying to desert those who need help, But the primary objective of a country, a democratic sovereign nation, is to look after itself first. Charity could come afterwards. If you're not capable of minding people, you can't mind yourself, how you will mind other people? That is something we have to consider. I know there are treaties about immigration and so on, but in a practical sense, you have to develop your country at least to a certain high level and then extend your hand to help others.
Professor, we're out of time. Thank you for being with us this morning. Always a pleasure talking to you. Have a great day. Keep doing whatever you're doing. You're looking good.
Thank you, Paul.
Thanks,
Thank you, Steve.
Professor
Thank you,
Deosaran.
Steve. Thank you, Steve, Paul, Raghu Barishing, and so on. Stephen,
Yeah,
Karen, all
thanks,
the names.
Professor Deosaran.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.